Today's episode of the GoldCast is sponsored by our first edition of the GoldDives. Yes, for those of you who are maybe not familiar with our off-season program, normally what we'd be doing right now is covering baseball and basketball, but unfortunately, both those sports are on hiatus. Everything's on hiatus. So what we do in between those, along while covering baseball and basketball, your Golden State Warriors, your San Francisco Giants, we also like to do what are known as the GoldDives. And so the GoldDives, if you're not familiar, or if it's been a while and you want to refresh your course, our GoldDive episodes are where we do deep dives into previous games, historical moments from our teams. And we've mostly been focused on the 49ers, and this very first episode is still focused on the 49ers. We'll be bringing in some Warriors and Giants games coming up this year. But right now, we are doing a Gold Dive on the San Francisco 49ers 2019 season. Oh, yeah, the one that just passed. Reason being is it was an epic season. And we decided that this season, out of all the seasons, deserved its own Gold Dive, a celebration. Even though it didn't end the way we wanted it to, we still believed it deserved to be celebrated, to be talked about in a positive light. We, in some ways, no one expected us to have the turnaround that we did. And even though we weren't able to seal the deal, it was still an incredible season. And this episode is dedicated to the celebration of the 49ers 2019-2020 season. Now, Raymond, before we get started, why don't you let them know where can they find the GoldCast?
You can always like us on Facebook.com/theGoldCast, and you can follow us on Twitter at @the_GoldCast, and be sure to subscribe to us via Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Stitcher, all under the same glorious moniker of the GoldCast. Like, subscribe, and comment, because we certainly want to get your feedback on this revisiting of what was mostly a very exciting and fun season to watch.
Absolutely. Now, Raymond, if they want to talk to you directly, where can they find you?
You can always find me in one of two places. On Twitter, I'm Ray Solis, at Ray Solis, and Instagram, I am at Ray Solis1, the number 1.
Yeah, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram under the same moniker. I am Rudy Third. I am Rudy 3RD. All right, folks, here we go. We're going to get into it. Our first Gold Dive of the new offseason. It is a celebration of the 49ers 2019 season. We're going to talk about how we're going to break this down after the intro. But first, your professor of fanalism, he's in the building. The greatest fanalist in the game, he's here too. Class is in session. Let's go.
San Francisco, are you ready? This is the GoldCast.
Boom. Welcome to another edition of the GoldCast. We are the voice of the Bay. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis the First, baby.
Boom. All right. Raymond, the first edition of our 3-part Gold Dive. This is a 3-part Gold Dive. We already gave you a little brief breakdown in the intros, but let's break down what each episode is going to look like. So, episode 1 of the 49ers 2019 season, the Gold Dive, is going to be weeks 1 through 8. Episode 2 will be weeks 9 through 17. And then episode 3 will be our awards for the regular season, our recaps of the playoffs, and our awards for the playoffs. So it's going to be a lot. We're going through a huge chunk of football right now. And we figure with everything going on in the world, this is the perfect time to do it. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this Gold Dive, because this one is going to be awesome. All right, Ray. So let's go all the way back to week 1. And before we even begin, I want to talk about, how did you feel going into week 1? We famously had a episode where we did all of the odds for the season, and the lost episode that never got to air. I can't remember what the complications were. We had some major issue with the volume. And I remember, I think I had the Niners at like 6 wins. And you had them, you were pretty close. You had them, I think, at how many games? Do you remember? I think I remember, but I want you to say it.
I don't remember. 10 or 11.
You had them at 11 wins. It was 11 wins. And you had them winning like 7 straight at one point, which I thought was insane.
Right, but I guess, I don't know. I guess my optimism was accurate.
It really was, because even though they did win 7 straight, it wasn't, you kind of had them winning 7, I think, like after week 4 or 5.
Yeah, I don't think it was the exact. I didn't get the exact 7 straight wins. I thought maybe we would lose to Pittsburgh and one of the Rams games.
Yes. And so you were feeling pretty optimistic. I want to talk about how I felt first, and then I want to hear where you feel, because I want to end on the positive. So I was feeling like we hadn't really addressed the secondary, so I was very nervous about that. I was excited about Nick Bosa. I was very trepidatious about the health of Jimmy G and how quickly he was going to bounce back. And I just had an overall feeling that if we could just win 6 to 8 games, I would be happy. But I felt like I had gone in the previous 2 seasons pretty confident, and this was the season that I was really kind of going, I am not going to overshoot it, and I'm pretty sure I had us at 6 wins. And I just thought that the Rams and the Seahawks were still a class above us, and I did believe that we were going to split, I believe, with both teams. I might have had it getting swept by the Hawks again. But that's where I was at initially with the Niners team. I just thought that we're still a little bit too many holes. Jimmy G coming back from injury. I was at the most 8 wins, but I was prepared for 6 because I didn't want to get my hopes up too high. Where were you at the beginning of the season? Obviously, 11 wins. You were pretty confident.
Well, I felt like even though the secondary, they were banking on players that I did not have a lot of faith in, like Jimmy Ward, who ended up having a terrific season, and Jaquiski Tartt was kind of a wild card because he was younger, and meaning, but he was younger, but he was also showing some injury-prone habits, but he was not to the same consistent degree that Jimmy Ward was. So there was a little holes there. I didn't know what we were going to get as Sherman, because he had a decent year the year before, but some of those stats were slightly muddled because people were targeting the other side. Because why even bother with Richard Sherman's side when the other side is completely, it's so vulnerable that you'd be an idiot not to target the opposite side of Sherman.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned this a couple times. You felt like Sherman's stats were a little juked the prior year.
They were. I mean, they were good. They were good. They weren't completely. It wasn't an entire they weren't completely blemished by this fact, but it was very real and very apparent. I vaguely remember like 1 or 2 teams even admitting to this, but they're like, what's the point in even targeting Sherman's side when the other side is giving up, so many plays every single game, which was true. We had given up tons of big passing plays the year before. We were, bottom half of the league in pass defense. You go from, the back end of the league to the best pass defense in the league. That's, hard transition. Usually teams, from 31st to first, we weren't the 31st ranked defense in 2018. I don't believe. But we were certainly in the 20s, bottom 10.
Yeah,
I believe.
I think we were hovering around 24 or 26, somewhere in there.
Yeah. So going from bottom 10 or bottom 5 to number 1 was not something that I had envisioned. I was hoping that maybe a decent pass rush would help mitigate some of the flaws on the back end, but what I didn't expect was for both ends to play exceptional throughout the entire season, which is what we got. Even though, a secondary success is most of the time, or I guess you could argue all of the time, is predicated on the success of the pass rush, because you the more time, the longer a play lingers in terms of the quarterback's time in the pocket, then the less favorable the matchup is for the secondary, because you don't know where the receiver's going initially. Maybe you have a read on it in the first. Maybe you understand the formation, so you have an inkling on like it can either be one of these two routes or one of these three routes or something like that. But after a play breaks down and there's still no pass rush, the wide receivers are pretty much improvising at that point. And that becomes even more cumbersome for a defensive back to try to read and anticipate. It's just really, really difficult. So the longer that a passing play goes on in terms of trying to find a receiver and not being able to get to the quarterback via the pass rush, then the secondary is just going to have a really difficult time. So I just thought that maybe if we had a decent secondary, they'd be able to help offset some of that. But what did end up happening is that both sides just played great, and the middle played great. The linebackers were terrific, the secondary was terrific, and the pass rush was obviously the best part of the defense. But obviously, that's what you want. That's if you want to sacrifice one of your levels, 1, 2, and 3. Like if in other words, if you only had a choice on which level you would want to be exceptional, I would always take pass rush every single time, 10 times out of 10. So the fact that we were even able to get what we ended up getting out of it was far above and beyond my expectations, and pretty sure above the expectations of a lot of people, with the exception of maybe a few kind of wild cards that just kind of had more ambitious expectations than even I did. Because I know there was a couple people out there, I can't remember them, but I know that some people had some pretty high expectations for the Niners. I just can't remember which pundits they were. But I know that I wasn't the only person that was kind of riding a higher horse for what we were going to see out of the Niners than a lot of other people. I think a lot of other people were cautiously optimistic.
I think cautiously optimistic is the right word. Yeah, I think cautiously optimistic is definitely the right word. All right, so with that, let's begin the season. So before the season began, the 2019 season, the 49ers Super Bowl odds, they were 36-1. That's 8. They were at the 18th spot. The top 5 teams to win the Super Bowl. This is all to win the Super Bowl. Patriots at 7-1, Chiefs at 8-1, Saints 9-1, Rams 11-1, Eagles 14-1. So pretty much from the beginning, Vegas had the Patriots and the Chiefs sitting there at the top of the heap, and they had a lot of NFC teams followed by that. The Saints, the Rams, and the Eagles were pretty much the top 3 seeds that that Vegas believed had the best odds of winning the Super Bowl, and the Niners were sitting there all the way down at the 18th spot at 36-1. Week 1 opens. We're on the road. We spend most of the first half of this season on the road. This is we are at Tampa Bay, Niners versus Bucks. The Vegas odds had San Francisco winning by -1. The Niners were pretty slow to start, but already, even from game 1, you're starting to see signs from Bosa. And, Bosa basically sat out, Raymond, if you remember, for most of preseason. Lots of pressure on Winston, and he finally gets his first sack in the third. You also see Richard Sherman showing signs of the brilliant season was about to come. He gets a pick 6. Jimmy G is a little wobbly.
Also in the third quarter.
Also in the third, yep. Jimmy G's a little wobbly here, but better than I remember. He looked better than I remembered him in this game. Of course, he throws that pick 6 pretty early too.
He does.
What are your thoughts early on? What are your thoughts early on in this game?
This was a game I thought we could win, but I also thought that we might lose this game. I thought this was a 50-50. Just because this was...
Vegas, SF -1, that's not a lot. That's just 1 point.
Well,
they weren't sure either.
Exactly, and this was like one of the best passing offenses in the league the previous year, and sure enough lived up to the same expectations this year, while also giving the ball to a lot of cornerbacks at the same time. But this game, I thought, as it went on and the ball was giving up, I thought the third quarter was obviously our best quarter. We had the pick six by Richard Sherman. Jimmy G threw the touchdown to Richie James. That was a nice throw. The big bomb down the left side, just a straight up, post route, just a go route or a post route, one of the two. I don't know. We'll have to ask Johnny Dells to clarify that for us. Mostert looked very much like the Mostert we had seen in the playoffs, just very elusive, terrific vision out of the hole. I think he has the best vision out of all the running backs, and obviously he got stronger and stronger as the season went on and he got more touches. But I could also see that style in him early in this game as well. That was one thing that stuck out to me. Oh, also, Deebo Samuel, his first play was a fumble, which was at the end of the second quarter in this game. And
good call. That's right.
George Kittle had 2 touchdowns called back in this game.
This would become a growing trend for the first several games of the season.
Yeah,
is Kittle losing touchdowns week after week.
Yeah, and this was the very first touchdown score of the season for the 49ers was called back on a flag.
That was the other thing about this game. Lots of penalties. Oh,
yeah.
My God. The Niners have penalties left and right. Actually, you know what? Let's do this, too, while we're not
21 points off penalties. 21 points negated off of penalties. Mostert had a touchdown called back for a penalty, and Kittle had 2.
So, actually, let's do this, Raymond, too. While we don't get too far into this, I wanted to actually start with this. Let's talk about all the starters. So here's the starting lineups for the 49ers on offense, on defense. So, on offense, you got Jimmy G, obviously at quarterback, Kyle Juszczyk, Tevin Coleman at running back and fullback, Deebo Samuel, Marquise Goodwin at wide receiver, George Kittle at tight end, Michael Person, O-line, Mike McGlinchey, tackle, Joe Staley, tackle, Lakeland Tomlinson, guard, Weston Richburg, center. So there you go. On defense, we've got D Ford, Eric Armstead, D Ford, defensive end, Eric Armstead, defensive end, DeForest Buckner, defensive end, DJ Jones, defensive tackle, linebacker, Drain Greenlaw, Quan Alexander, linebacker, Fred Warner, linebacker, Akello Witherspoon, defensive back, Yaquiski Tart, defensive back, Tavarius Moore, defensive back, and Richard Sherman, defensive back. So there you go. That is our first game one lineup. But yeah, going back to this sloppy play from the Niners. I mean, the penalties were just left and right all over the place. Now, this is something that will get cleaned up as we went through the season, but you can see that September rust all over this team, and a team that is still, despite playing actually pretty well, still finding a lot of its footing in this game. We had a total of 11 penalties, 87 yards. 87 yards on 11 penalties. That is intense.
Yeah, the Tampa Bay had the same amount of yards, but that was with 8 penalties. So they had less penalties, but some of their penalties were obviously more severe because they ended up accumulating the same amount of yardage, negative yardage that we would. And I also thought it was interesting that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, especially in the second half, were outgaining us on the ground. They would finish the game with 121 rushing yards compared to our 98. We couldn't even amass 100 yards in this first game, and I think those penalties really just kind of took the gas and the wind out of the sails, or the gas out of the car on any momentum that we tried to establish for a lot of these plays. Remember, Raheem Mostert had a huge callback for that touchdown. That touchdown was at least, I believe it was 20-plus yards that ended up getting called back, and that was in the late in the second quarter. So, we would have had well over 100 yards if you take away a lot of these penalties out of this game, and you would have had 21 more points on top of the 31 that we put up on Tampa. And Tampa had, I believe, one penalty that negated a touchdown as well, too. I'm not sure if they had more than that because I honestly wasn't paying attention to them as much.
And you know what? In the fourth quarter, I thought it looked like the Niners were going to let the game slip away again. At that point, where you're looking at 20-14, and I'm starting to think, are the Niners going to let this go? But they really clamped down, and again, a lot of foreshadowing to the rest of the season. They only have 6 points in the first half, but then have 14 points in the third quarter alone, and then another 11 points in the fourth quarter to amass a total of 31 points. Final score 31-17. And you already can see, even in the beginning of this first game, those second half adjustments become really important with this team, and something that we will kind of see be repeated over and over and over again.
Totally. And, in the end, they only got a field goal, and the Niners put up 11 more points in that fourth quarter. And Jameis Winston would contract the infamous interception disease that would plague him throughout the remainder of the season. He threw, I believe, 2 pick sixes in this game. I think he threw...
Yeah, one to Keller Witherspoon and the other to Richard Sherman.
Yeah, and he would throw... whatchamacallit? He would throw 3 overall. 2 of them went back for scores.
So would you say that is the – so we're going to have a couple things here, ladies and gentlemen, for the GoldCast audience. We're going to talk about our inception moment, and these are just the waves that each one of these games made. The 49ers, as we go through the season, they make a lot of waves, and there's a lot of ramifications to how well this team did that were felt throughout it. And then, of course, the second one we're going to talk about is our dagger moment. So would you say – this was the beginning of the inception moment? This is the moment that the foreshadowing of Jameis Winston's intense interception, the interception touchdown ratio would begin.
Oh yes, this was the worst case of interception disease I've ever seen in a player. And Jameis Winston, yeah, I would say this was, 2 pick sixes. That wasn't the only pick sixes he would go on to throw on for the season, but he had 2 big ones in this game. And one of those pick sixes was definitely the dagger.
Yes, and I think we agree. Keller Witherspoon's pick 6 was the dagger. That was the end of this game and the end of the Bucs for week 1.
Yeah, totally. And that was a 25-yard reception. He was getting pressured out of the pocket and just threw to no man's land, as the color commentator put it. And sure enough, Keller Witherspoon was sitting in the zone, read it perfectly, and took advantage of Jameis Winston's horrible malady that cost him the starting quarterback position. Little did we realize that TB12 would be coming to Tampa in the offseason.
Absolutely. All right, here we go. Moving on to week 2. So week 2, 49ers are still on the road. Now we go to Cincinnati. Cincinnati 0-1. We are 1-0. Vegas had Cincinnati at -1. So they believed that the Niners couldn't pull off 2 road games in a row. Let's go for our starting lineups here, Raymond. So our starting lineups for week 2. You've got Jimmy G, Kyle Juszczyk, Matt Breida, Deebo Samuel, Marquise Goodwin, George Kittle, Michael Person, Joe Staley, Mike McGlinchey, Lakeland Thompson, Western Richburg. That is our offense. Moving down over to our defense, we've got DeForest Buckner, D. Ford, Eric Armstead, DJ Jones, Quan Alexander, Fred Warner, Akilla Witherspoon, Tavarius Moore, Richard Sherman, Kwan Williams, Jaquiski Tart. Good, nice lineup. So let's start talking about this game. The Niners, I was pretty confident we could beat Cincinnati. I was like, this team is garbage. They're garbage. We can definitely beat this team. We can take this. How did you feel going into week 2?
Well, I was riding high on the momentum we'd set in the first game, and I felt like Bengals are trash. This was a game I definitely picked us to win overall. And, we'll get to the Bengals inception moment, but this was a game I felt pretty good about. And I know there was the bonehead pick by Jimmy in the beginning, but the Niners put up, 21 points in the first half. Or, I'm sorry, 21 points in the first half, or 24 points, I think, if you count the field goal. But yeah, they came out and served the Bengals pretty hard in the first half. Jimmy was overall great. He threw for nearly 300 yards. Threw 3 touchdown passes. He did have the one bonehead pick that I mentioned, but that was kind of the one big mishap on his end. Outside of that, the Niners. This was really a Niners pure offensive game. from on both sides. Not only did they amass, nearly 300 yards of passing offense, but they amassed I think they had 259 rushing yards in this one too. So 291 yards, which is almost all of their passing yardage, that was all done in the first half. So 291, almost equivalent to their passing yards is what I meant. 291 yards of their total offense was amassed in the first half alone. So they were running roughshod early on in this game. So this one I felt was, to me, it seemed like it was over early on, about halftime. I was feeling pretty good about it. I don't know how you felt, but it was, 24-10 at that point?
Mm-hmm. Now, if you remember correctly, during last season, I was talking about during preseason, if Jimmy G could get his feet underneath him, I predicted somewhere around games 5 and 6, 7 and 8, somewhere in there he could get his feet really underneath him. Then, we have a chance at least making a run. And Jimmy G, I thought, showed up early. Now, these are the games that everyone seems to forget about. He's 17 of 25, 296 yards, 3 touchdowns. Yeah, sure, you got 1 interception, but 17 of 25, 296 with 3 touchdowns? I don't understand the problem. That's fantastic. That's week 2.
It's a good fantasy
That's
stats.
week 2. Yeah, absolutely. And overall, you see a lot of ball distribution early on, even from Kyle Shanahan here, Matt Breida, Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., everyone getting the ball. And you see that Deebo Samuels, they're including him early on. And, he's a little up and down. Sometimes he drops a couple passes that he should have caught. And sometimes Jimmy doesn't always put it in the right spot for him. And the other thing I was surprised about is Dante Pettis gets a little bit of action here, and you guys will see as we go on later in the season, he gets a lot of action in weeks 4 through 8 or 5 through 8.
Yeah, he
gets
threw
a lot
the
of
ball
action
once in this game for 16 yards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he gets a lot of action, but it just he doesn't. That's what I meant here. They throw him in a little bit here, but it doesn't. That's about as far as he goes through this one. This is let me see, a couple other things I wanted to talk about here. The dump-off pass to Mostert, I liked it because it's a sign of things to come. We're still sloppy with the penalties, though. McGlinchey with that huge offsides. That was followed by an interception from Jimmy G. Just back-to-back, kind of back-breaking stuff. The defense really does its job and really keeps us in these games, especially kind of despite the offense's lack of cohesiveness, especially in this first quarter of the season, But the thing I did notice early on is that Jimmy G is spreading that ball a lot. Everyone kind of gets in on the passing game. Deebo Samuel, Kyle Juszczyk, Marquise Goodwin, Kittle, Richie James, Kendrick Bourne. Everybody gets their hands on that ball, and that was nice to see. What would you say, Raymond? We kind of joked about this offline. What would you say is the inception moment? What was the thing that Cincinnati realized after this game?
Probably putting up the dud in the third quarter. They didn't score any points in the third quarter, and they probably would have gotten shut out in all 4 quarters, except for that really bonehead John Ross play, that 66-yard touchdown with less than 60 seconds to go in regulation. That ended up
garbage time.
That ended up making the score, giving them 17 points as opposed, up against our 41 burger that we had put on them. A 40 burger. There is a 40 burger. There's a 50 burger, and there's a 40 burger. And that's what happened here. We had 10 rushing plays of 10 or more yards. The rushing game, they just had no answer. They had no answer for the passing game. They had no answer for the rushing game. The Niners just steamrolled this team. And this team would go on to, this is how confident the Bengals are. The Bengals were so confident in this season that they would go on to secure the first pick in the draft of this year. That was the mental commitment that this team made from the beginning, from this week 2 all the way until the end of the season. They would only go on to win 2 games after this. They would lose 12 more games after this game. They would lose 12 more games, and that's commitment. That's I know that the Niners went 2-14 under Kyle Shanahan, but keep in mind that it was like five games straight we lost by 3 points or less. You're not trying to secure an early pick when you're competing that closely. Whereas the Bengals, got their ass kicked most of the season.
Absolutely. What would you say was the dagger moment for this game?
Probably in the third quarter, the Jeff Wilson or not, the Deebo Samuel score, the one that made it 31-10.
I was going to say the Jeff Wilson Jr. score right at like the start of the fourth, just to be like, here, you're done. But either one, I think either one is good. You're saying the Deebo Samuel 2-yard pass from Jimmy G. I'm saying the Jeff Wilson Jr. 4-yard rush from Jimmy G. But either one is probably a royal ass whooping. Either way. Raymond, this is the first time since 1989, the Super Bowl winning season, that the Niners opened with back-to-back road games and won them both 2-0. 2-0 for the first time since 2013. How did you feel after this? I felt pretty happy. I wasn't sure if we could sustain it, but I was excited.
I was pleased. I was very pleased. I mean, I was more than pleased. I was jazzed. Who doesn't love a blowout? I don't like the. I mean, in retrospect, I enjoy the nerves and excitement of a close contest like the 2011 divisional playoff game between Alex Smith and Drew Brees. But in the midst of that, I am extremely uncomfortable with the nerves that my body goes through, while watching that game and not wanting us to fall short like that. That stuff, that's all super uncomfortable for me because I'm so into it and obviously very passionate about this team. And when they're in those tight positions of close contests, it's nerve-wracking. The Saints game, the one that we'll get to in another episode, that was a nerve-wracking game. So was the Ravens.
That took
game.
Weeks off my life.
Yeah. I mean but that wasn't the case in this game. This game was complete. Next week was a little nerve-wracking. Week 3, the next game we're going to get to is pretty nerve-wracking. But this Bengals game was fun. We've owned the Bengals. We owned them twice in the Super Bowl, and those were good games too. Those were excellent games that went down to the wire. Bengals did give us a run for our money, representing the AFC in both of those Super Bowl appearances. But as far as the overall score, the Niners have got the Bengals number. I've never run into any Bengals fans, but I know that Cincinnati has to hate the Niners with a passion for those 2 80s losses and plus this blowout win. That's just got to sting.
I would imagine that Ohio fans in general, after dealing with us for the NBA and for the Niners, I wouldn't be surprised if Cincinnati fans, anyone over the age of 35 probably hates our guts. I don't know if anyone under the age of 35 even cares. It might be too old, But maybe they hate our guts by proxy. We'd have to check the Orange and Black Stripes cast to really know where they lie.
Yeah, the Tiger cast, as they call it.
The Tiger cast.
The Tiger King
That's
cast.
Right. The Tiger King cast, exactly. The Tiger King cast. All right, that absolutely. That's we'd have to check where that is. So let's move on. So now, here we are, week 3, and this was the game that people, for the first time, and we're going to hear this a lot in the next for the rest of the season. God, for the rest of the season, we're going to hear this. This was the first game that people said was going to be possibly a real test for the Niners. Even though the Steelers had not had that great of a start, they were 0-2 to go into this game. This was the first team that we had played this season that had overall had a pretty successful decade and was a team that many expected to go to the postseason. Steelers at this point, though, not starting out the way they expected. They are 0-2. 49ers coming home to make their first home opener for the 2019 season. The Vegas spread on this one. Vegas was not a believer in Pittsburgh either, despite the analysts. A lot of analysts were picking them to win this first game on the road and get their season going. Vegas had San Francisco at 6.5 favorites. So let's go to this one. Raymond, let's start first with the 49ers starters. Pretty much pretty much the same lineup, but here's where we first start seeing some changes. Dante Pettis is put in over Deebo Samuels as starting wide receiver. Justin School is put in at tackle. Those are the big changes there. Now, on defense, we've got all the same usual suspects.
Well, we lost Joe Staley in the Bengals.
Yes,
game.
and that's why School's in there. And then in defense here, it looks everyone is the same. We still have Ahkello Witherspoon, but it's not much longer. This is a ticking time bomb for our boy Ahkello Witherspoon right here. So, but yes, that's the big changes. Marquise Goodwin in place of our boy Deebo, and then School in place of Staley. That's the big difference on offense. So let's get this going. Let's start talking about this game. This was the game, Raymond, that started out, and it felt a little trap gamey. Didn't it feel that way? Little trap gamey in the first half.
A little.
Niners really
a little bit. I don't know if that was the phrase that was rolling around in my head, but I thought this game was a game that we could possibly lose when we were doing early predictions, just because Pittsburgh was a more talented team at the time that I made the prediction. I didn't anticipate that they would lose Ben Roethlisberger by this point, which they did. Mason Rudolph was in there, who had little to no experience, and obviously Antonio Brown had left the team at this point too, so it was just Juju Smith-Schuster carrying the reins as far as wide receiver potency went, and James Conner, who was actually a really good back, a really good dual threat back, but he actually never really got going in this game for some reason. So I don't know what it was, but San Francisco came in with a really good rushing defense that surprised me and really stuffed James Conner. And perhaps it was because of them cleaning up some of the things that happened in the previous couple weeks. So I don't know, but either way, I know that this game was ugly. I mean, 4 turnovers in the first half alone. We would go on to give up 5 overall. It was 6-3 at halftime. We just had a field goal. A 3-point lead going into the halftime. And this is when Pittsburgh had made a desperate trade to get Minkah Fitzpatrick from Miami, who had a really good game overall. He had a interception from Jimmy Garoppolo, and he also had that forced fumble that he caused too from, I think he knocked it out of Raheem Mostert. I could be wrong. But there was a lot of things that happened in this game that really had me question whether we were going to come out on top or not. But
you mean that very first play when he tossed it to Breida and he bobbles the ball and then it gets intercepted?
Yeah, I mean it's twofold, right? If it hits your hands, it's catchable, which means that Breida could have caught it. At the same time, Jimmy underthrew the ball and he threw it behind Breida, so he did force Breida to have to make trying to catch the ball behind him, basically stifling his momentum when Jimmy's supposed to throw the ball in front of him. Had Jimmy made a better throw, that wouldn't have been a pick. Had Breida not bobbled it, it also would have negated a pick. But I think because, the play is predicated on an accurate throw, is more dependent on that throw being where it should be than Breida having to make an off-schedule catch. I put the blame on Jimmy for that one.
Yeah. Now, luckily, even after that goes down, though, Witherspoon making an immediate impact. Can we talk about these first several games? This opening season for Witherspoon is so impressive. He is everywhere. He was
shut down his first 3 weeks. He was shut down straight up shut down the first 3 weeks.
Yeah, you just could not get anything past him. Now, here's an interesting stat that they said during this game, that the Niners had averaged 179 rushing yards through the first 3 games, like up to this point. It was 179 yards. So even though the running game, like you had mentioned before, not quite where it's going to be, still extremely impressive. Now, obviously, a lot of that came from that week 2, because we couldn't even break 100 in that week 1. But at this point, they're averaging about 179 yards through these first 3 games. Niners, they go from the interception to the fumble. And again, I was sitting there, really, the Niners have to punt. Then this is followed by another interception. The Niners have 3 turnovers in the first quarter, through the first quarter to the beginning of the second quarter. 3 turnovers that lead to 6 points total from the Steelers. Niners only put up 3 points in that first half. Jimmy G, I don't know if you remember, the fourth turnover, Jimmy G fumbles under center. Do you remember that one?
Yeah. And that was in the red zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that really cost us. Steelers playing some really good defense against us. But in the third quarter, this is when the game would really turn around. And I would say one of the big turnarounds, even though we didn't score off this drive, this was the beginning of the momentum really starting to change, was Quan Williams' huge interception in the third quarter, right around the start of the third. You remember that?
Yeah, he had an interception the previous week too, and I think he was making up for getting tossed out early on in the Tampa Bay game, which was, a coming home game, playing against his former team the previous year. So he was definitely on fire in these next 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Then we finally start to break this game open. 49ers get their first touchdown, Jeff Wilson Jr., which was his third touchdown of the season at this point. A lot of Jeff Wilson Jr. in the beginning of this season. And again, the thing I really like about Shanahan, his ability to mix things up. You're seeing a lot of, he's got his favorites here in the first several weeks. And as injuries go and as players start to reveal themselves as being able to sustain, and he's able to find more weapons and ways to use people, you'll see these things shift. But you see hints of guys like Mostert who are going to come up and end up being, our big heroes by the end of the season. But then you guys see guys like Jeff Wilson Jr. making an immediate impact early on. And his presence is felt. 3 touchdowns already, and it's only week 3. Pretty good for him. Deebo Samuel's still struggling in week 3, and you can see why Pettis got the start over him. He has another huge drop. 2 weeks back-to-back in my notes.
Yeah, totally. But, I mean, the defense really kept us in this one for the most part. I think at one point, I believe Jason Verrett came in, and I think that's because Ahkello Witherspoon went down, so Jason Verrett came in the game, and he would come in for two plays, and that would be the last time we would ever see Jason Verrett again.
Yeah, that was which we kind of called. No one was confident about him. Jeff Wilson ends up with 2 touchdowns on the game, and Dante Pettis gets his first big touchdown of the year. And that was
dagger.
Yeah, the dagger. Well, you know what else? What I thought the dagger was? That was the Armstead causing that huge fumble.
Yeah, Armstead was huge in this game. Armstead would be huge throughout the entire season, which would obviously end up leading to the offseason decision that we ended up getting this year, which was to keep Armstead and jettison Buckner. Unfortunate, but there's a reason why, which we've already talked about at length.
Yep, absolutely. And you're right. I mean, Jimmy G to Pettis, that was a huge one. It was 1:15 left to go, and that pretty much put the game out of reach. And the defense in this game was really ridiculous. I think this game, not only was it the homecoming party for the 49ers, but it's the homecoming party for the defense. The defense has really established itself as something you don't want to F with, my dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really one down. Bosa in this game, one solo tackle, 1 tackle for a loss. Just fantastic. 1 QB hit, and I know that's not jumping out the page, but it sure is going to be, especially in the next game. So following the final score on this game was 24-20 in favor of the 49ers. Actually, let me give you the scores for all the games. The final score for week 2 was 41-10 in favor of the Niners, and then obviously the final score of week 1,
41-17.
Yeah, 41-17. Yes, you're right. 41-17, and then the final score for the Bucks game, 31-17. All right, here we go. Week 4, we get the bye. And how much bullshit was this that we get this bye at week 4? You know what? I'm not going to skip it because I'm still annoyed by this. I'm still annoyed that we had a bye in week 4, which means we had to go from week 5 all the way to week 17. And I don't know if you remember, the Niners were damn tired. They were damn tired by the end of the season. And it's because of this stupid bye in week 4, which I thought was an insult.
I thought it was horrible. I don't know whether they were doing that because we were so injury-riddled the previous 2 seasons, or if it was just bad scheduling or a mixture of the two. It just didn't make any sense. Like, no other team has a bye this early, so why are you doing this to us? Like, every team, everyone knows that you get a bye between like weeks 6 and 10. That's usually the sweet spot for most teams, near, at, or after the halfway point. That's usually when a team gets a break, and and teams need a break around that point. It's actually really nice. The Niners did not get a break, which is why they were so damn gassed, and why that first round bye became even more pivotal than usual, just because the Niners team was desperate for it. You could tell in the way that they were playing down the stretch, and everyone was just really, I think everyone was clamoring for a break, and that playoff bye came at a really opportune time for them. But yeah, that was definitely irritating, but it was still what ended up happening in this game just ended up being fantastic, and the Niners got off to a hot start right off in the first quarter, the first play in their first drive.
So let's talk about the next game. The next game is Week 5. This is Monday Night Football. Niners 40. They possibly have the chance, if they win Week 5 here against the Cleveland Browns, they have an opportunity here to win their 49th Monday Night Football game, the most wins by any team on Monday Night Football. Why? Because we're the goddamn 49ers. This is always our opportunity. Week 5 versus the Browns.
Yeah, this sellout crowd too.
Yes, this was the next big. This was considered by many the first big test. You guys are going to hear this many times throughout this Gold Dive. This is the Bosa versus Mayfield game, Ray. This is the one. This is the best. This is Bosa at his fieriest. Vegas did not believe in Cleveland, despite many pundits saying that the Cleveland Browns, this was the game where they were going to air it out, and this was the game that they were going to get back on track. Vegas was not a believer. Not by a huge margin. They had San Francisco at 4.5 favorites. So let's start talking about this game. The 49ers, same exact offensive start. No change there in our offense. In our defense, everything is the same. The only difference here we've got is our boy Tavarius Moore is out. Tavarius Moore
and Emmanuel Mosley gets his first start.
And Emmanuel Mosley gets his first start. You got it. That's exactly right. So, Ray, let's talk about this game. This game was pretty hyped. This was early in the season. The Cleveland Browns were the offseason darlings. Everyone thought after the way they ended the prior season and with their pickup of OBJ that this team was really, really finally going to make a run. People have wanted Cincinnati to make this run forever, or Cleveland to make this run. And this was the moment where Browns 2-2, Monday Night Football, our opportunity to have the most wins ever on the line. This had a lot of hype going into it. I was pretty hyped for this game. How did you feel?
I was excited too, but I did not trust Cleveland at all. I did not trust this team. I'm pretty sure I had us at a win in our prediction episode, but this team, just because I think Cleveland's Cleveland. You have an unproven coach playing with some big name free agent acquisitions along with some younger guys. Myles Garrett obviously was a standout on defense, but this team had a lot of unproven pieces, and to put them all together for a first-time head coach, I had no trust in that team. And sure enough, it was the Matt Breida play that really set this thing off for me. I think it set it off for everybody too.
Yes. So let's talk about that. This game begins with just the ultimate. So Witherspoon, again, out there making it happen. Sherman kills the Browns' first drive. And then on the opening play of the very first play of the game for San Francisco, Breida makes a touchdown. Very first drive, very first play, 7-zip. Talk about that play, Ray. 83-yard rushing touchdown.
Yeah, and I believe he was clocked in at like 22 or 23 miles per hour, which is the fastest in the NFL, even faster than what's his name, Tyreek Hill, who's lightning. But yeah, so that I thought that was amazing. Sherman got his second pick of the season in this game. Bosa was all over Mayfield. I think he was pretty pumped for this game. But Matt Breida setting it off with huge. That he would account for. That was nearly, that 82 yards accounted for almost more than a third of our rushing output for this game. We would finish the game with 275 yards. So we just demolished the efforts in any previous week up to this point. And sure enough, we just ran roughshod against Cleveland. Cleveland just had no answer for the running game at all. It's almost like they didn't trust it. They're like, this is going to be fine. I mean, Jimmy threw sub 200 in this one. No picks, but he did threw touchdowns in the air. So he was errorless in this contest, and he did his part on the offense through the air. But this game was really about the rushing game, and it's definitely started and ended with Matt Breida. Matt Breida destroyed Cleveland in that opening drive.
Yeah, he had 11 attempts, a total of 114 yards, 1 touchdown, and, of course, his longest being that 83-yard opening run. Baker Mayfield, we were talking about quarterbacks. So, yeah, Jimmy G, 20 of 29, 181 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. His longest was 22, averaging 10 yards a pass. All decent numbers considering how big the running game was here. And you're going to have games like this. It doesn't matter which quarterback you are, you have games like this. Baker Mayfield, on the other hand, oh boy, let's talk about this, especially because he famously before this game had said, I've played Bosa before, and acted as though, he really wasn't concerned about Bosa. He was 8 of 22, only 100 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions.
Sacked 4
times.
That's
where we were at. Sacked 4 times. Bosa. Let's go back to our boy Bosa
also
here.
Fumbled twice. He had 4 turnovers credited to his name alone. He did recover one of those fumbles, but lost the other. So he had a total of 4 turnovers. 3 of them he lost.
My goodness, Nick Bosa, Ray, 2 sacks, 4 tackles, 2 TFLs,
and
5 quarterback hits. Yep, and a forced fumble, and 5 quarterback hits. 5. He just murdered him. It was fantastic. So let's go through a couple other big moments. Buckner, also with the huge sack. He gets this pretty early on. Breida has a great catch. They score again. They're 14-0. Buckner comes in with another sack. He sack on the next drive. Bosa recovers the fumble. Gould misses a field goal. Let's talk about Gould for a minute. If I remember correctly, we had issues with our long snapper, and Gould missed so many field goals because of this long snapper in the very first in this first half of the season. Do you remember this?
He missed like five, I think 5 field goals, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. But yeah, apparently it made a huge deal, and people don't realize how important the long snapper position is for the kicker. But it certainly affected Robbie Gould, who's normally nails for the most part. He was certainly nails for us the previous season, but he definitely was off the mark in this season. And some people were thinking it was a combination of the fact that he held out for more money and missed a lot of training early on in the off season. But then you compound that with the fact that the long snapper was gone, because our long snapper was serving a 4-game suspension at the time. So we had to come in, or was it 4 or 6 games? I can't remember. Either way, he was gone. He was not in this game either. And sure enough, that ended up impacting Robbie Gould's effectiveness in the first half of the season. However, we've got 3 blowouts through the first 4 weeks. So obviously Robbie wasn't needed too much in that effort as far as field goals are concerned, although we did need him against Pittsburgh. But that was annoying to watch, because it was almost like, the uninformed fan will immediately look to the holdout. But when you look closer to some of the more nuances of football, because it's a very complex sport, you do realize that a lot of those miscues in the early half of the season were attributed to the fact that he didn't have the same snapper, and that snap does affect the holder, who is Mitch Wisnowski, and which then affects Robbie Gould's ability to kick the ball in the proper location. Because if you don't snap the ball correctly, it's more time It's like tenths of a second for Mitch Wishnowsky to get the ball in the right position. And if that's off by inches, the game of inches will be affected. That's not just a clever, phrasing for how to describe the game of football. The game of football is very much a game of inches, and that those inches matter to a kicker very much so, just like it does to any other position player.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Also, another thing worthy of note, in the third quarter, George Kittle finally makes a touchdown that isn't called back. Finally gets his much coveted first touchdown of the season in the third quarter. And at that point, it is 28-3, and this game is basically a wrap. This is a wrap. This game, I thought the game was over at halftime when it was 21-3. I thought it was done then. I said, this is done. They're done. This, and I'll tell you what, this is what I think the inception moment is. Why don't you tell me? This is the inception moment here, where this is where we delivered to everyone the inception moment that Cleveland was not going to be very good this year.
They weren't. And, that would be a month later, Baker Mayfield would look like a hobo with a mustache and a long trench coat talking about the loss to the Broncos in November. This would be the beginning of a very difficult month for Baker Mayfield, and he would just get more disheveled in the post-game press conferences as the weeks went on. And to me, I believe it started with this game because I think they had a lot of confidence coming into this game. They were really looking to get over 500. You're sitting in a decent position at 2-2, but there's a big difference between a team's success in a position like this, and the difference is whether you go. There's a difference between a team that ends up going 3-2 versus 2-3. That changes the percentage values on a team's success, on whether they can get into the tournament or not. I mean, that's a huge difference. There's a huge drop off in the team that falls below 500 early in the season, like the Browns did. And sure enough, that would end up being. I think they would go on to win 4. They would go on to be 4-7 at the remainder of the season. So obviously, very difficult season for them, and they would once again put themselves in a decent position to get some decent picks, as the Browns do every year. But they always kind of screw that part up too. The only thing I would say in recent years, I'd say that they hit a home run with the Myles Garrett pick, even though he ended up getting suspended for the remainder of the season with the whole. What's his
fight
name?
With,
the fight with the Steeler quarterback, Mason Rudolph.
Mason Rudolph. Yeah. A couple other big things. OBJ. They said, remember this, towards the end of the game, they put OBJ back there to recover the punt. He fumbles, and the Niners recover. I mean, this really and at that point it became just all three fronts. We are swarming on you, offensively, defensively, special teams. We're just kicking the shit out of Cleveland. Another city, a city that we were talking about this during the Cincinnati game. I would argue Cleveland probably hates us more right now. Would you imagine? They probably hate us more just because of the whole Cavaliers, Warriors rivalry.
Well, they just hate the Bay Area. They hate this whole region.
Yeah. Yeah, they hate this whole region. So the other big thing that happened at the end of this game was the infamous Nick Bosa flag swing. He did it after his second sack. He mimed it, which was copying when Baker Mayfield had actually done it to him. Actually did it to him when they were playing in college, and then Nick Bosa takes the 49er flag and he plants it. This is something that would come back and be put in our face a little bit later on in the season, but what a moment when Bosa mimes it and then does it again. I loved it. I loved that moment. What did you think about that moment?
I thought it was awesome. I thought it was a great boastful moment, and a boastful moment for Bosa. Boastful Bosa. And I like how in the NFL replay I was like, they better not cut this play. They better not cut his taunt from this play. I want to see this taunt. I was going to actually go back and watch the full game just to see that one part if they were going to edit it out. But sure enough, they kept it in. So that was very pleasing to the eye and ego.
Absolutely. So at this point, we are now 4-0 for the first time since 1990. And we are officially the last team in the NFC undefeated. Raymond, Do you know who was the last team undefeated in the AFC? Do you remember who it was?
The Patriots.
Yes. So Jimmy G's old team, the New England Patriots, and his new team, his beloved San Francisco 49ers, are the lone two teams left in the division. And this was the game, Raymond, where I famously began our Why Not Us campaign. Let's talk about the Why Not Us campaign. I talked about this. I was saying, the Niners have veteran leadership at every level. At almost every position, we have somebody that's been to either a conference championship or has been to a Super Bowl. And I named the players, right? Jimmy G had been to Super Bowls as the backup quarterback to Tom Brady, right? Tevin Coleman had been to Super Bowls with Shanahan for the Falcons, right? Dee Ford, conference championships with the Chiefs, right? Staley with the Niners, previously under the Harbaugh era. Richard Sherman with the Seahawks, right? At every level, you had guys that had done this. The only place we didn't have it at this point in the season was at wide receiver. But I said, why not us? Why can't we go on a run? Remember this, Raymond? Why not the 49ers? Right? We're looking across the sea. We're looking at everyone. We're looking at the way this team is playing, the way this team is gelling. I'm not saying, I remember this. I remember saying this on the podcast. I'm not saying that we're going to do it. I'm just saying, why not us? Why not the 49ers? The Philadelphia Eagles, they had the same exact turnaround, bottom of the league, all the way to the Super Bowl, beating the Patriots in one of the greatest Super Bowls I've ever seen. Why not us? And the Why Not Us campaign really begins right here. So, Raymond, let's move on to now what they were calling the new first real test for the 49ers. Week 6. Oh, final score, though. Final score, 31-3. Get the F out of here, you douchebag team. All right.
In your douchebag land.
Yeah, exactly. Get out of here. All right. This is now what they were calling the real test for the 49ers. And this really happened. Go back and look at the tapes. Every week they kept going, this is the real test for the 49ers. So we have our first division rival, the NFC champions, the losers of the Super Bowl the previous year, the Los Angeles Rams. We have to go in once again on the road. We're on the road a lot in these first 8 weeks. We're on the road to face the LA Rams. I don't know about you. This was a team that I was a little nervous about. I was like, this is the real test, but it wasn't so much about nervousness for me. It was about getting revenge. I just wanted to kick this damn team's teeth in. I was sick and tired of them walking around like they were the big dogs in the NFC West. How did you feel going into this game?
I thought this was going to be a true opportunity, like, to make a statement. I was like, all right, we're 4-0. We beat some pretty good teams. We beat Cleveland, who was 2-2, but I was never a believer in Cleveland. So I thought that the disparity between our talent level and their talent level was accurate. So I thought that this game against the Rams would be a bigger test. So I thought, all right, if we win the next game, then I think people will start to take us more seriously, and I think the Niners could really put themselves in a really prime position, confidence-wise, and also within the standings too. So I thought that this was a big game going into this, and I thought if we win this game, this is like a really a milestone for the team, for the progress up to this point, going into year 3, putting all these pieces together and having it, come together so beautifully so far throughout the season. If we could keep the momentum going, then it will be less flukish to the people who are doubting us right now.
Agreed. This was, I felt we had already been, we had been battle tested with Cleveland and Pittsburgh, although they put up very little fight. This was, you said it right, the statement game. This was for the NFC West. If we could beat these guys, then we were for real, and not just to the NFC West, but to the entire league. So let's talk about how this game goes down. This game, first of all, let's go through the starters. Kyle Juszczyk out. Ross Dwelly goes in for his place, and that's the only major change. Emmanuel Mosley getting his second start of the season, and that's pretty much everyone else stays the same. Am I missing anyone there? That's everything I'm seeing there.
I think that's right.
Yep. So let's get into this. This game, Raymond, when I watched this one back, this is a lot more competitive than I remember it being. I remember it feeling even by basically the third quarter, I remember going like, this game is over. But when you really, I mean, granted, the Rams never scored again, but the Rams, it really felt like the defense, if we weren't kicking their ass with our defensive playing, they were shooting themselves in the foot with a lot of offensive penalties. And you can really see the discipline of the 49ers really starting to set in by this time here by this game, because the Niners are playing really tight football and the Rams are playing us pretty good, but offensively, they just could not get anything going. What did you see?
I saw a very sloppy Rams team, a team that was really starting to unravel under the, bet the future in the hopes of winning one Super Bowl now philosophy that's going on over there that's certainly come back to bite them. I'll give them credit in the fact that it did get them to a Super Bowl, but if you don't win that Super Bowl, you're between, a rock and a hard place trying to get back to that. And sure enough, that's where the Rams are now. So and unfortunately didn't work out. The dice roll didn't work out for them, and they're just struggling to get back into it. And we'll get to the inception period here. But this game, I thought that this was a pretty, first of all, the fact that they ran like 7 or 8 straight rushing plays in the opening drive to score that touchdown, I thought, whoa. I was like, someone, Sean McVay's good enough. I think Sean McVay is a good coach. I think he's got a great mind. He's very creative. Again, I still think he's a derivative of Kyle Shanahan, but I think he's the closest derivative. Meaning, if there's anybody that has decent schemes to kind of be a runner-up to Kyle Shanahan, I think it's Sean McVay, at least within the NFC West, because he always plays us pretty well. But I think that the talent diminishing the way, or not really kind of unraveling the way it has the past couple years, and a lot of it starts with Todd Gurley. They kind of gassed him, unfortunately, with the he's got like tendonitis or something that it's some kind of reoccurring injury.
Something that they kept lying about for all the way through the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and it just really it affected his ability to really stay and be that, again, to me, I think I like the running back committee system over the primary back system, which is what the Rams run. Dallas has that with Ezekiel Elliott. I believe Christian McCaffrey is pretty much that same deal in Carolina. But that really, unless you've got a unique running back that's like going to be an all-time great, like a Jerome Bettis or a Barry Sanders or an Emmitt Smith or a Walter Payton, those guys who ends up lasting 10 years and never seem to, almost never had a shitty season in their entire career, you're going to run into a brick wall with these running backs within, 3 or 4 seasons. And, and sure enough, Todd Gurley is in that category now. And unfortunately, he just doesn't have the same, unless he gets into a committee format, he's never going to be the same back he was when he first entered the league. He's got an injury that just does not serve the bell cow position well. If you're in a committee system, you can preserve him, but not this one. So anyways, but I thought, the Niners were just in a prime position here, and the first half of this game was super competitive. I thought that we seemed to have a little bit less of an edge in the first quarter, but then as the game went on, especially in the third and fourth quarter, I thought that the Niners had a decisive schematic advantage, especially when Kyle Shanahan came out with the second half adjustments.
Absolutely. Rams came into this week at 3-2. Vegas did not believe that the Niners were going to pull this off, and they put the Rams at 3.5 favorites. So let's talk about this. This was great. This actually happened in the second quarter. We end the first quarter 7-7. Tevin Coleman goes in for that diving touchdown, which was badass. Do you remember that one? Badass. And then on that second drive, the Niners defense comes alive and puts pressure on them fast. They have to punt. The Rams have to punt after a Jared Goff sack. They're going to get used to that for the rest of the game. My favorite announcer moment in the second quarter is after Kittle's big run. The announcer goes, "Come get a taste right now. I'm George Kittle." I just thought that was amazing.
Oh, yeah. It was Mark Schlereth, the
Oh, was that who said that?
Former offensive lineman for the Denver Broncos when they won the Super Bowls. And he's a big fan of Kyle Shanahan because he obviously was coached by Mike Shanahan and is very familiar with Kyle. And I believe they have a rapport. So there was a little bit of bias going into this game. It wasn't an annoying bias, but you can tell that Mark Schlereth was having having a good time calling this game, watching Kyle Shanahan succeed, and then watching one of his favorite players, George Kittle, play out of his mind like he usually does.
Yeah, come get a taste right now. I'm George Kittle. That was the best. Yeah. That's the best. I'll tell you a funny Mark Schlereth moment. I actually saw him. A friend of mine they were doing their graduating improv performance at UCB, the old original studio off of Franklin, I think is where it is. If you're from LA, you know. And Mark Schlereth's daughter was performing at this thing, and he was there with his wife, and they were watching her perform. And I swear to God, it took everything in my power not to go up to him and go, "Hey, I just want to tell you I'm a big fan." But I kept my mouth shut. And, I went the L.A. pro style, and I didn't give him a hard time. But I've actually seen him in person. We sat and watched his daughter perform at UCB. That's my one Mark Schlereth.
Nice.
All right. So let's talk a little bit real quickly about the discipline of the 49ers because this bears mentioning. So in that very first game, we were 11 penalties, 87 yards. Week 2, 9 penalties, 75 yards. Week 3 against Pittsburgh, 6 penalties, 42
See
yards.
A pattern
now
emerging.
It's getting cleaned up. Yep. 7 penalties, 55 yards now against Cleveland. And now here in L.A., 4 penalties, 30 yards. This game, I thought, while not the flashiest of games offensively, was an excellent marking of the discipline. This was what I call the Neo moment, and we've talked about this before on the GoldCast. The Neo moment is that moment in the Matrix when Neo is when the subway is, they're in like that New York subway station, and the subway stops, and Agent Smith comes out of the subway, and Neo runs, and he sees the staircase, and he stops, and he turns around, and he decides he's going to face Agent Smith, and then it cuts back to Morpheus and all the crew, and they're outside of the Matrix. They're in the Nebuchadnezzar, and then I think it's Trinity. I think she goes, "What is he doing?" And then Morpheus goes, "He's beginning to believe." And that's the moment. That's the Neo moment when an athlete or a team, they begin to believe. And this game for me is the Neo moment for the 49ers. This is when they begin to believe. You see the discipline. You see them dialed in. You see these guys starting to really understand what's at stake and what they have in front of them. And this is the game that I really believe that the Niners, this was the Neo moment where they're like, wait, we can defeat these guys. We're good. We're really good. And there was a swagger that started to happen. And this game wasn't easy for them. I thought the Rams defensively played really, really well. Wade Phillips, I think, is a great defensive coordinator, and I thought he did a wonderful job of keeping this Rams team in the game. But the 49ers, as you mentioned, Raymond, you see the Rams unraveling. Going back to this, let's go back to this. The Rams were 8 penalties for 59 yards. So a 20-yard difference and double the amount of penalties. That's a big difference, and especially in a game this tight when the game opens at 7-7, this is really where it matters. And you already mentioned the second half is where it breaks off. The Niners really win this game in the third quarter, rattling off 10 points. Jimmy G with the 1-yard rushing touchdown, which was awesome, and then Robbie Gould with the 25-yard field goal. Robbie Gould struggling to kind of get going in this game, and but really in the second half they come back. And so let's talk about that. What are your thoughts on that second half of the game where you really see the discipline kicking in?
Well, I thought that the Rams kind of, based on what you had seen, their meltdown in the early going of the season, that I felt in the end, they had enough scheme and talent to last them one quarter because they would get shut out for 3 straight after that. Even though it seemed like at moments they were putting up a fight and getting some drives going. But, I mean, even defensively. And they still had Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters at this point. Keep that in mind. The only constant on that team that was worth his salary or still is what's his name? Why is his name escaping me all of a sudden? The defensive player.
Who are you talking about?
Aaron Donald.
Aaron. Yeah.
Aaron Donald's the only one worth his salary on the team at this point. In fact, he was the only. The Niners gave up 2 sacks in this game. Both of them were the Aaron Donald. One was in the opening series drive, and I forget when the second one was because who cares? But in the second half, the defense really came out. They had the defensive stand late in the first half to keep the game tied before going into halftime. And then you had, I think, like 2 or 3 more turnover on downs by the Rams. And I think the last one was desperation because they had already the game was out of reach, and they were just trying to go for big plays, Hail Mary like plays to just get the ball downfield, and it couldn't. And Jimmy Ward even denied them on a 3rd and 4th down conversion on one of those turnover on downs. Jimmy Ward was excellent in this game. And while you said that, that Neo moment where, he's beginning to believe, I think Sean McVay had a similar Neo moment, but it was the opposite, where he was beginning to realize how much his team sucks. And sure, he's beginning to believe his team sucks, and sure enough,
so when he turns, Agent Smith sticks a knife through his throat, and that's the end of the, that's the end of the moment for him.
Then, the one dies, and then they have to go through the whole historical cycle again. And sure enough, they would trade Marcus Peters and Aqib Talib a few weeks later. Or I think it was like 2 weeks later, something like that. And Marcus Peters would go on to become an all-pro starting cornerback for the Ravens. And Talib, I don't know where Talib ended up, but I don't think he went to the Pro Bowl. But Peters was the big one. That was kind of a big FU in his face. I mean, I just don't think he was thriving in that system. When he went to the Ravens, I think he got rejuvenated and he had 2 pick sixes once he got over there, and I think he had like 3 overall. But he had a terrific season. Sean McVay had a reverse Neo moment for sure.
He did. Let me ask you this: what is the dagger moment in this game for you? Because I'll tell you what mine is. I wonder if it's the same.
That's a good question because we only scored 2 touchdowns in this game, and everything else was Robbie Gould. So I think, to me, I would say probably the goal line stand by Jimmy Ward to deny the Rams on 3rd and 4th down.
Damn it, Ray, you're good. That is exactly the dagger moment in this game. That is exactly the dagger moment happened at the goal line stand in the second quarter. Robert Saleh going crazy, screaming, jumping on the sidelines. That was the goal line. The game was won on that. That was the what I like to call when a major tackle happens, when some big moment happens, I like to call sit down little boy, like the biggest sit down little boy moment. And that was a sit down little boy moment where we looked at the Rams, we're like, sit down little boy. That was the moment for us. Yeah, I agree. We win this game, Raymond. Rams have lost 3 in a row. We're number 1 in the NFC West, and we win 20-7. The Rams only scored 1 time in the first quarter. Let's move on to the next game. This game, we don't have to spend too much time on it. I think it's probably the most boring game.
The most uneventful game of the season for the Niners.
The most uneventful game of the season. If you want to talk about discipline,
that wasn't a loss. That wasn't a loss. There's a little caveat.
That wasn't a loss. Yeah, exactly. This game, we only had 2 penalties for 20 yards. Pretty good. You want to talk about discipline, getting more discipline. But this game was ugly. This was, of course, our Week 7 matchup in Washington against Kyle Shanahan's old team. The Washington professional football team was 1-5. The Vegas odds had us at -10. We would win this game by 9 points. This was supposed to be the revenge game for Kyle Shanahan. And when we did, but trap came, we almost fell to. That was again the ghost of the trap game came with its hand trying to reach out and take us away.
Did, and it brought Mother Nature with him too.
We really struggled this year in rainy games. Let's just be honest here. That's for real.
We did, but I mean, to be fair, most teams do. This especially this type of game. So the Ravens game, I felt that there was higher stakes, so you had to take more risks, and there was less rain in that game. But this game was so rainy that Kyle Shanahan even admitted this in the post game press conference, that when the weather elements become that strong and that to that degree, I mean, it was 55 degrees, the wind was 12 degrees, but it was raining like crazy. But at the same time, basically your playbook goes out the window. It goes completely out the window when it's that bad. And when players' jerseys are filled with mud and they're drenched in rain and muddy fields, then your playbook goes out the window. And that wasn't the case with the Ravens game, but at moments it certainly looked like it was going to head in that direction. But the Washington game was like this from kickoff until the final gun sound.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some changes. The offense stays the same from the week before. Ross Dwelly still in place for Kyle Juszczyk. The big change here, though, is Solomon Thomas getting a start and at D-line, and then our boy who would come up big later in the season, Dre Greenlaw, getting a start at linebacker. These are the two big changes. Emmanuel Mosley, third game, staying in a row. Overall, I would say this was a pretty sloppy game, uneventful game, but the most important thing, players were slipping and sliding all over the place. I would say probably the most memorable part is Bosa with that final sack on the final drive, sliding across the field. That became a clip that you saw over and over for the rest of the season, all over the place. You would see that in the highlight reel. Bosa sliding and the Niner team sliding across the field. Anything worthy of note you want to talk about? I mean, there's really not a whole lot here. Washington was a joke. They were 1-5, and we handled them pretty soundly at 9-0. We got our one Jimmy G interception. But of course, they made Case Keenum's day living hell. Anything you want to add before maybe we move on to the next game? This game is not a whole lot happening.
There isn't. I thought AP started strong. And it's funny, if you watch the opening drive, even though the weather played a big factor into this, if you watch the opening drive by Washington, they almost were mirroring exactly what the Rams did. They just they fed the ball to AP, I think, for, what it seemed like almost like 7 or 8 plays straight. It didn't amount to a score, but it certainly, was. I think this was the thing that I think we talked about too. Is I said watch other teams try to duplicate this opening drive that the Rams did on us with this straight running plays, because they've exposed the weakness, and now other teams are going to start to copycat that. And we would see that.
When you say that was the inception moment for us, that was the inception moment for us, was that we were going to have a little bit of trouble against the run.
Yeah, realizing that there was a weakness there that got exposed. We got exposed pretty hard, and sure enough, you expect that out of division opponents. It always takes a division opponent to kind of keep you honest, keep you humble. And sure enough, the Rams did that in that opening drive, even though that was the last time they would score or, do that much damage on the ground. After that, Niners would really tighten things up. But sure enough, AP had some really big runs in that opening drive too. And I'm pretty sure that would have happened even if it wasn't raining, because it just seemed too coincidental. I was like, they're not even attempting to throw the ball. They're just run. I was like, this is exactly what the Rams did to us. I was like, so I think that's where that influence was coming from, more so than the weather playing into the element, although that would obviously factor into it as the game went on. But yeah, that was about it for me. I thought it was an ugly game. Even the refs were not in position at one play in it. The whistle played dead, and that was towards the end of the game when the Niners fumbled the ball on that same play. But they had already whistled the play dead, so Washington didn't get that break. I think we'd go on to score 2 more field goals, because we just had the 1 field goal at that point, or we might have had 2. I could be wrong, but the Washington was still in it. Had they got the ball at that point and got down at least for a field goal, they would have been in it. But sure enough, that led to us keeping the drive alive and getting another field goal out of it. And yeah, both teams were scoreless in the first half. This was just an ugly game. I remember I missed, I think, the opening quarter in real time because I was with a friend, and then we ended up going to a brunch spot in the city. And, the game was so uneventful. We ordered mimosas and pancakes, and that was more enjoyable than the game was.
Yeah, this is definitely the least uneventful. The one great thing I would say, going back to this defense, Nick Bosa leading the team in tackles was pretty awesome. He did great.
He had the closeout sack. That was the best part of the game, was the closeout sack and the mudslide.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on, Raymond. Week 8 and the final game of our first half of the Gold Dive 49ers 2019 season. So, Raymond, they were saying that this game was going to be the first real test for the 49ers.
Yeah.
This was the one.
The 4-2 Panthers coming in. Cam Newton hits the bench, and Kyle Allen riding a four-game win streak, undefeated up to this point.
Yes, 4-0. He had gone undefeated. The first real test right here. Vegas had the Niners still having the faith, starting to get more faithful. They had us at 5.5-point favorites. Finally back home again, and we're rocking the 94 white unis. And I like that the red's a little brighter. Did you notice that? The red's a little brighter on this one. I thought that uni was so clean.
Yeah, that was the best, especially as the season went on. In this game, I felt like as the season went on and we started wearing those uniforms more, the players started to more players started to match the outfit with white cleats, whereas in this game there was quite a few players still wearing black cleats, and I think that the uniform looks way cleaner when you have the white cleats also. To couple on with the mostly white uniform. But yeah, and this was a game that I was in attendance. I was physically there.
You were there. Let's talk about that, Raymond. So you're there. Tell us the experience of being there at Levi Stadium, watching this game in person.
Well, we went to go tailgate with the family. It was in celebration of cousin Brian's birthday on that weekend, and he wanted to go to the 49ers game. He didn't know that we were going to be there, so it was a surprise for him. We tailgated. We ate awesome food and had some great drinks, and we got a couple of George Kittle bobbleheads, one for you and one for Dad.
Yes.
And yeah, this game from beginning to end, I'm surprised I didn't lose my voice with how much I was yelling and slapping five with all of the fans. We were on one of the end zone sides in the third level. Still a great vantage point. For the most part, you can see both ends of the field and you can see all the action happening. And of course, when it comes down to your side, you can see it really well. But overall, just impressive stadium, impressive game. Really fun to be there, especially for what ended up being the amazing historic 50-burger game against a Carolina team that really was never in it. I remember some of the annoying things going into the game was Eric Reed tried to, give an interview with the press alluding to the fact that, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch did Navarro Bowman dirty when really they didn't. It was just business as usual. And he just remember said, like, I don't forget things like that. Well, you know what we do forget? We forget shitty plays. And sure enough, he had a shitty game, that game for Eric Reed. So I was very pleased with that. And he doesn't even play for Carolina anymore.
Nope. This also, Raymond, this was the big turning point. I mentioned this earlier during the Why Not Us campaign. I mentioned during the Why Not Us campaign that the only position that lacked conference or Super Bowl experience was at wide receiver. And I can tell that Kyle Shanahan obviously, clearly must listen to the GoldCast. He's probably listening to us right now as we speak. He heard that episode back in week 4 and said, Rudy Solis III is right. Him and his co-host, his brother, Ray Solis I, they are right because I should go out and find that wide receiver. And he did when they made the big trade for Emmanuel Sanders from the Denver Broncos. And this was going to be his first start of the season. He comes in, our starting lineup, Emmanuel Sanders and Deebo Samuels, starting this game off. Emmanuel Mosley still hitting it off in defense. Jimmy Ward also in the lineup for this game as well. They called him Mr. Glass. But now he has a chance to become the Iron Man, as Raymond said. He wanted to see, can he break that glass? So obviously 2 major pieces coming into the fold in this game, Raymond. How excited were you for Emmanuel Sanders? I was like, please just be good. Just be good. I was like, I hadn't really watched him this year, so I wasn't really sure, but I knew he was putting up decent fantasy numbers, which if you're putting up decent fantasy numbers, you're generally doing well as an offensive player. And I was excited, and I thought there was a high potential, but of course you just never know with these things, you know?
Yeah, you don't. But I mean, I thought like, all right, he's a little bit older, and he was putting up good numbers. I thought the potential was pretty high because he was putting up good numbers on a team with a shitty quarterback and a shitty offensive system. So I thought him coming here, you know, that's got to speak volumes to what he can potentially do here, which he would obviously go on to do really good things for this team. It's unfortunate that he's not with us no longer, and that he's with a rival that we'll get into in the next episode. But what I was excited for was because I thought that the ceiling was much higher for him here than it was where he in Denver. And that was basically predicated on the fact that Denver was struggling really bad at that point. Denver would pick up some of the slack in the latter half of the season, but Vic Fangio just really struggled in his first year as a head coach. That was very obvious. But at the same time, Emmanuel Sanders was their best offensive player on the team. And I think Dad had him on his fantasy team. Somebody had him on the fantasy team. And, you know, he's actually doing decent. So it's like,
might have been Brian, actually.
Might have been.
Who you were there for his birthday. I think he did have him.
Yeah. And sure enough, I mean, that ended up paying dividends for us on the road to a Super Bowl appearance. But yeah, I was excited for this. But even though, you know, I wasn't expecting a whole lot from him because it was the first game in a short week turnaround for him in order to get acclimated with the offense. You know, it was still nice to see him get involved, especially in the opening drive. But sure enough, this game was really, in my mind, anyways, I don't know if you feel the same way. This game was all about Tevin Coleman.
Oh, yeah. Not only was it all about Tevin Coleman, if the Rams game was the statement game to the NFC West, this was the statement game to the NFL. This was the statement game to the whole league. This is week 8. Midway through the season, the 49ers are here, and we are not playing around, and we are for real. We are super for real. After I saw this game, that's how I felt. I was like, this team is for real. This is no joke. This is not a drill. Now, everyone's talking about and knowing that this second half of the season is coming, and we have the gauntlet on the way, sitting in the horizon. But this was the game that was like, we are here to kick your ass, and you are not going to have a good day playing us. The Tevin Coleman is absolute destruction in this game. The defense is absolute destruction in this game. We are firing off on all cylinders, unstoppable in this game. It was, Emmanuel Sanders, he gets that first touchdown. Tevin Coleman rattles off 4 touchdowns. Deebo Samuels rushes in and gets a touchdown. Everyone got a little pieces. Raheem Mostert gets in there. Once again, this team really, this is the statement, as I said, not just to the NFC West, to the entire NFL, that they have been put on notice. We are now 7-0, baby, and it is no joke. Talk a little bit about that, Ray. Talk about the overall dominance of this game with this team.
This was dominated on both sides of the field. I mean, Nick Bosa had 3 sacks, had the huge pick that almost got returned for a touchdown. DJ Jones had a sack. Armstead had 2 sacks. Blair had a sack. Sherman had a pick. 232 rushing yards on the ground from the Niners. I know Christian McCaffrey ended up having a decent game for you in fantasy. And this was the beginning of the end for Kyle Allen, who ended up having his, to me, I feel like the inception moment for Carolina was really revolved around Kyle Allen.
Yeah, that was the inception moment for them. That it was not, Kyle Allen was not going to be the guy. So he goes in 4-0, Raymond. Let the audience know, what was his record after this?
1-9.
Ooh.
So this would be the beginning of the end for Kyle Allen's confidence, who would eventually go 1-9, en route to pave the way for one Teddy Bridgewater. and minus a Cam Newton. So Carolina's basically saying, Kyle Allen, you're going to ride the bench. Cam Newton, we're done with you. Teddy Bridgewater, welcome home.
So I got to drop some crazy stats on you. This is insane. In the third quarter, the Panthers finally score a touchdown. But the Niners had not allowed a touchdown in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
It was the McCaffrey touchdown, right? Because it was 13-27 at that point. And McCaffrey on the sideline, he's like, "Let's go." He was pumped because you're 2 possessions into this game. So they were still in it at that point, at least from his mindset, you could tell, and perhaps some people on the team, but that got shut down real quick.
Yeah, it was like 10-21 or something like that when he hits that one. Oh, it's 27-13. It's 27-13 when he hits that one. But Raymond, did you know that the Niners there were 9 quarters of football between the Rams touchdown and the McCaffrey touchdown? And those 9 quarters, not a single touchdown was scored by any team.
Wow.
That is insane. 9 straight quarters, 9 straight shutout quarters, no touchdowns for 9 straight quarters. From the Rams opening first quarter to this one, we went 9 straight in between those 2 touchdowns, 9 quarters.
Wow.
That's an insane stat. That is crazy.
That's 2 games. That's like back-to-back shutouts.
Mm-hmm. Basically. The Debo with another one of his reverse sweeps, which we saw pretty early on in the season. I forgot to talk about that. That happened a little bit earlier, but another one of his classic, those jet sweeps you like, those reverses. He was just so unstoppable. I wrote in my notes, Debo scores to add more sauce on this spicy burrito. 34-13 Niners.
That's great.
I loved the best Bosa moment in this one. You already mentioned it, is without doubt that interception. How does he make that interception? He's like right there. You never see that interception from that close. That was insane. He had 3 sacks and an interception on the day at that point. Just incredible and absolutely the backbreaker. What would you say? But is that the dagger? Where's the dagger for you in this game? It feels like this is a game of 100 daggers.
There's about 8 daggers in this game, but I would say, gosh, I like to think that after the Christian McCaffrey score, where he still thinks he's in the game and he's hyped on the sideline, I really like the Deebo Samuel 20-yard rushing score that just goes in your face like, hey, that was a great play, McCaffrey, because you're a tremendous player, but you're playing a team that is way beyond you guys. And that's when it's like, all right, 13-27, no problem. We'll go 34. We'll go 34-13. You're out of this. There's nothing you can do about this. I'd say that on the offensive side, and then defense, it has to be the Nick Bosa pick.
Yeah, I agree with those. Absolutely. Mostert puts the finishing touches on this game with a touchdown on the ensuing drive, 51-13. And this is my favorite line. I have no idea who was announcing this game. Maybe you do. But because we're watching the condensed version with just all the big moments, sometimes you just hear a response and you have no idea why they're even saying it. But the announcer goes, "You know what I was doing in 1990?" And the other announcer goes, "What?" He goes, "Dispensing justice in the NFL." I was like, what the hell? I have no idea who was calling this game. But that's what was said. You know what I was doing in 1990? Dispensing justice in the NFL. I was like, wow, who are you, Judge
that?
Dredd? What's? I don't know. We're going to have to look that up. Maybe someone from the GoldCast Empire knows who said that.
Yeah, because I don't see it in the Pro Football Reference notes.
No, I don't see. I don't. Do they normally have the?
They have a lot of stats, but those are like the 2 stats they don't have.
Is who the play-by-play announcers were? You can usually find that on like Wikipedia. We'll have to look that up. But overall, wonderful start.
You know what? I think this is Mark Schlereth again.
Are you serious? Is he in both these games? Is he called? No.
That sounds like something Mark Schlereth would say.
I mean, it really does.
And he was an offensive lineman, so he's a bruiser. I'm pretty sure it's Mark Schlereth.
We're going to have to look this up. Someone from the GoldCast Nation, let us know. But Raymond, this concludes the first half of our Gold Dive. Niners win this game 51-13, sitting atop the NFC West in first place. And I believe they're atop the entire NFC. They're number one in the whole NFC at this point.
7-0.
7-0, baby. Feels great, baby. Feels great. Raymond, any final thoughts before we go?
This was very exciting. I enjoyed the ride home from this game, obviously. This was probably the highlight of the season for me, just because I actually got to go to the game and watch it live unfold, and just, pretty fortunate to have gone to a game live and just watch a royal ass whooping midway through the season, and the Niners just dominating.
Absolutely. This was the game for me where I went from why not us to we're for real. This team is for real. And this is happening. This is happening in real time. And it was a really exciting moment. And we knew that lurking just around the corner was the second half of the season, which some are calling one of the some have said statistically it's the hardest second half of a season any team has ever played in the Super Bowl era. That's how that is coming up. And of course, we all know that Seahawks are around the corner. And of course, the gauntlet. Oh, the gauntlet. The famous gauntlet. It was around the corner. And we're going to talk about that on the next Gold Dive. We're going to be back a little bit later in this week. And we are going to do, the NFL has just released their all-decade team for the NFL. And, famously, several players, 49ers players are on it. We are going to do our all-decade 49ers team. So this is going to be what players make the all-decade team from the entire era, from the last 10 years of the 49ers. The NFL did theirs. We're doing ours for just the 49ers. That's coming up in just a couple days here. So stay tuned. And then next week, we'll be back with our second half of the Gold Dive, which we will go through weeks 9 through 17. Of course, the Seahawks, the 2 games with the Seahawks, the rest of our Cardinals games, and the gauntlet. My favorite part is the gauntlet. I cannot wait to go through those games. That was insane. So here we go, folks. Let us know at youtube.com/thegoldcast what you think. What are your favorite moments from the first 8 weeks? What were the turning points for you? What are the inception moments? The moments where we casted doubt in the other teams? What were the dagger plays for you? Let us know. Go to youtube.com/thegoldcast and let us know in the comments. That's pretty much where most people like to talk to us. But of course, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook, facebook.com/thegoldcast, Twitter @_Goldcast. So concludes another edition of the GoldCast. We are the voice of the Bay. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis I, baby.
Boom! We'll see you next time. Same GoldCast time, same GoldCast channel.
This is the GoldCast.